Okay, good.
Okay, I think we're live. My screen says live on Facebook, so I think we're finally here. Hello, hello. As always, there's technical things that come up, but thank you so much for joining. And I've got my phone, which will tell me if you guys are out there. So send us some little hearts or thumbs ups or those kinds of things so I know you're there. We have a guest today, and we actually, that was a monkey. I'm in Costa Rica right now. So that was a monkey in the background saying hello. So we may hear, there we go. There we go, back again. So I think this monkey's a ham. So it's but I'm in Costa Rica, and hopefully the transmission will be strong. And if there's any breaks, just hang in there, folks. We'll be back. We'll come back on, and this is all being recorded so that you can get the information. So we're going to have two guests on the show today, and I have not met either of them. The one person who's here now, Susan, is I just met her 5 minutes ago and haven't asked her two questions yet, other than she's a friend of one of my staff persons. So Susan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Yes,
of course. I see the people are out. Thank you so much. I see the hearts and the thumbs and things coming up. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I know you're out there, and I'm not talking to myself or just a conversation for Susan and I. So there's another person who will be joining us from Australia as soon as she figures out how to use the link. And it was this other person who emailed a couple of days ago and said, "Hi, I've just been diagnosed with sarcoidosis of the heart, which is a nasty condition. And what supplement do I take?" And my wife saw that. Marzi asked me if I could make a comment, and I started to write out this long response that says, there is no supplement to take for the diagnosis of an autoimmune disease, that you really need to read my book, and you need, as a background, to understand the questions to ask. And then I thought, you know what? It's going to take me an hour and a half to write this to where it makes any sense. So why don't we just have Sherry in Australia come on and be here, and let's talk about it on, here on Facebook for everybody to understand, what do you do when you're diagnosed with an autoimmune condition? And then one of my staff said, well, my good friend from high school has been diagnosed with a similar condition. And so this is Susan. And so Susan, first I want to thank you for being willing to come on. And I know you're doing this because you hope I can give you some direction on what to do. And that's my goal. And I'll make sure that you've got that. And so thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you. This is a relatively new diagnosis for me, so I really don't have much information at all. So I'm definitely thankful that you're doing this topic tonight.
Great, great. So what exactly is the diagnosis that you've received?
I have cardiac sarcoidosis.
Okay. And for the audience out there, sarcoidosis is a condition where your tissue starts hardening up. That these lesions, these areas just start getting really tough, whether it's in your skin or it's in your heart or it's in your lungs. And historically, it doesn't stay in one place, but when it's in your heart, it means the heart muscle is starting to get all this crud built up in the muscle, so the muscle can't work quite the way it's supposed to. And it's a very scary condition. So first off, once again, Susan, thank you. And I understand what this might be like, and the kinds of questions and fears and what do I do kinds of things that come up. And there are hundreds of thousands of people out there right now that are feeling the same way, whether they've been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis or with rheumatoid arthritis or ankylosing spondylitis or psoriasis. And I in no way am minimizing the diagnosis that Sherry, who hasn't joined us yet, or Susan has received, but I want to give the whole world here, and for everyone that's watching, you need to tell your friends to watch this. Anyone that's got a diagnosis needs to see this. A diagnosis of an autoimmune condition or cognitive decline, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, that we're talking about the big picture here. So how do you learn? Monkeys in the background again. How do you learn what the questions are to ask? So we're going to talk about some basics first about sarcoidosis, and then we will take it to the next level with the questions that are coming in. Thank you so much. There's lots of people doing thumbs up, and Wanda Zerlo says, finally found the link. Thank you so much, Dr. Tom. This is important. Monica Buffalini is with us from Italy. Ciao, Monica. Thank you so much and for being here. And so let's just dive into this. I want to show you, I downloaded a few papers because just seeing these papers is going to help with an understanding of some of the topics I'm going to talk about. The first paper is called Sarcoidosis in Ac Milan, 1899. So there's the title of the paper. Now, what is Ac Milan, 1899? It's a soccer team in Italy that was founded in 1899. So what are they talking about? They're talking about a guy that got a tattoo. Right there, the tattoo on his arm is AC 1899 for ACM 1899 for the soccer team in Milan from 1899. This is the paper, and it talks about how this guy developed sarcoidosis. First, it was just some toughening of the skin under the red ink. That's where it started. Now, Susan's thinking, I don't have a tattoo, so don't worry. I'll tie it together.
Okay.
Yeah, I get it. So first, it was a toughening of the skin around the red ink. Then it progressed to more around the scar. Then 8 months later, it progressed in his lungs. It was identified in his lungs because he was having a hard time breathing. Then it went to his spleen. Then it went to his lymph nodes. Then it went to his heart. And then they wrote the paper about this. And what they talk about is that in this case, and all sarcoidosis is not like this, but all autoimmune diseases have a similar mechanism. It's not all tattoos, but it's a similar mechanism. And the mechanism is the immune system started making antibodies to the toxic ink. The antibodies to the toxic ink look enough like some parts of human tissue that the antibodies start attacking the human tissue. And that is the mechanism that they're talking about in this paper, Sarcoidosis in AC Milan, is the mechanism is called molecular mimicry. That the antibodies to the ink mimic the tissue of the human body, some different parts of the human body, and so the antibodies go after those parts of the human body. Then here comes the next paper, which I can't read backwards, so I have to tilt a little to read it to you. Bacterial antigens and molecular mimicry. The bridging common problematic link in the pathogenesis, meaning how this stuff begins, of sarcoidosis and sarcoid-like reactions. Isn't it time to wake up? So we have researchers, world famous researchers. This guy is a world famous specialist in sarcoidosis, writing papers that saying, isn't it time to wake up? That sometimes, not always, but sometimes you of course want to treat the condition, but you have to look and see, where is this condition coming from? Do you guys out there get this? Do you understand what I'm talking about? Susan, do you get what I'm referring to here?
Not really.
Okay, good. Thank you for saying that. That's great. So if your immune system starts making antibodies to a bacteria, let me give you this example. Most of us have some experience, either for ourselves or our friends, that if you go to the dentist for any work, the dentist often gives you antibiotics.
Okay.
Why would they do that? They do that because everybody knows that when the dentist works in your mouth, they squirt some water in there and you spit it out in the tub, that you get pink water, that there's some blood from them working on your gums. The problem when you have blood coming from the work the dentist does on your gums is that he has made some breaks in the barrier that protects the blood vessels from being exposed to the bacteria in our mouths. And we have hundreds and hundreds of different types of bacteria in our mouths. It's normal, it's common to have this. But when you break the barrier, now some of that bacteria can get in through the leak in the barrier that's been broken by the dental work. Now that's called leaky gums, by the way. If you've heard of leaky gut, there is leaky gut, there's leaky gums, there's leaky brain. That when stuff can get through from one compartment into another compartment, it's not supposed to get through to the other compartment. There's a barrier that protects stuff getting through the barrier into the other compartment. But when you make holes in the barrier or there's a breach in the barrier, the bacteria can get through.
Right.
That's called leaky gums. So when dentists are working in your mouth, they always create leaky gums. And for people who are vulnerable, the dentists give them antibiotics. Why?
Okay. Prevention.
Prevention, that's exactly right. And what are they preventing? They're preventing the staph bugs or the strep bugs. You know, we've all heard of strep throats. That means, you know, there's strep in your mouth all the time. That if the strep or staph gets through the leaky gums into the bloodstream, your immune system may say, whoa, what's this? I better fight this. And your immune system starts making antibodies to strep or antibodies to staph so that the strep can't form a colony in your blood and make you sick. The antibodies to strep, antibodies are always trained to go after one particular thing, one bacteria, one toxic chemical like red ink or whatever it should be. The antibodies are going after the strep. And the way they do that is they look for the signature of strep. They look to recognize it. They're looking at the proteins of strep. Now, your bloodstream is a highway, and there's no lanes of traffic. Everything's just bouncing around in there. You know, it's going in the same direction, but everything's bouncing around. So the immune system the antibodies are trying to fight strep, and they're looking for strep, and they say, oh, look over there. It looks like strep, because the tissue of your heart in this example kind of looks like the protein of strep. It looks enough like the protein of strep that the antibodies to strep might start attacking your heart. And if they attack your heart, that's rheumatic fever and rheumatic heart disease. So the dentists give you antibiotics to kill the strep that got through the leaky gums so that your immune system doesn't make antibodies to strep, because it takes a couple days for the immune system to make the antibodies. So your immune system doesn't make the antibodies, because if they make the antibodies looking for strep might go after your heart. So that's called molecular mimicry. And that same example of molecular mimicry occurs in rheumatic diseases like rheumatoid arthritis. And this is a paper from Dr. Alan Ebringer at King's College in London. Autoimmunity in rheumatic diseases is induced by microbial infections, that's bacteria, cross-reactivity, or molecular mimicry. Meaning, you can get the autoimmune disease rheumatoid arthritis because of a bacterial infection. Your immune system's fighting the bacteria, and it may get confused and attack your joints, the collagen in your joints. It's the same mechanism as the mechanism that what is this guy's name? Dr. Cheknerev. This is in Germany. He's world famous in the world of sarcoidosis. This German specialist talks about molecular mimicry. So if you have an infection, if you have a history of an infection, here's another example. This is antibodies against the most common bacteria that people get in hospitals. Oh, we have Sherry with us. Sherry, is that you?
Yes.
Hi, Sherry. It's nice to meet you. Sherry meets Susan.
Hi, Susan.
Hi, Sherry.
And you both share the same diagnosis. And I'm talking about this and giving some background. Sherry, you'll be able to watch the initial part if you missed it. Yes. I'm just going to continue here. So in this example of ankylosing spondylitis is another autoimmune disease. And this is a group of doctors in Italy talking about this autoimmune disease from the most common bacteria that people get in hospitals causing pneumonia. It's called Klebsiella pneumoniae. That if you get an infection to this bacteria in a hospital and your body makes antibodies to Klebsiella, because of molecular mimicry, you might make antibodies against your spine and develop the disease ankylosing spondylitis. It's a very similar condition with all autoimmune diseases, that your immune system is attacking your own tissue right now, and it's causing all these problems. And for the two ladies who are with us now, Susan and Sherry, they have a type of autoimmune condition that's attacking their heart. You know, this is not good. And this is why these guys are here, is to see if they can get some leads on what do I do, where do I go, how do I start this process? And so it's the big picture that you have to understand when you are dealing with a diagnosis. So let me give you a background visual to help. And this is for everyone out there. I need to just take a look and see here. Jennifer is here in Costa Rica. Hello, Jennifer. Yes, thank you so much. And Mike says hello, and Mary from Colorado, and Elsa Eva Maria, hello, and Veronica in South Florida. So thank you all for joining. Thank you so much. So here's the visual. When you get a diagnosis, when you go to a doctor, they give you a diagnosis. It's like you've fallen over a waterfall and you've crashed into the pond below. You swim up to the surface and you spit the water out and you say, oh, God, thank God I'm alive. I'm alive. And you're trying to stay afloat in this pond of diabetes, if you went in with diabetes, or this pond of sarcoidosis, or this pond of rheumatoid arthritis, or this pond of recurrent miscarriages. It doesn't matter what the diagnosis is for this visual. It doesn't matter. You're in the pond and you're trying to stay afloat, but the water is really turbulent because the waterfall keeps coming into the pond, right? And so you're trying to stay afloat in this pond of sarcoidosis, but the condition continues. It continues. So everybody's having a hard time staying afloat. So we all want the life jacket to keep us afloat in the pond of the symptoms or the diagnosis we have. It's really important to get a life jacket that works. It's critically important, especially in this situation. It's really important. And you always try for the more natural approaches with the least side effects possible. But if that doesn't work, you take the drugs. You do what it takes to stay afloat in the pond. But you don't stay in the pond of the turbulent water of how you've lived your life that caused this problem. You know, there has to be something in the history that set this up for both of you and for everyone out there with an autoimmune condition. There's something in your history. So what you have to do, get a life jacket so that you're comfortably afloat, as comfortable as possible, but you don't stay in the water. Swim over to the side, get out of the water, walk up the hill, go back up the river and figure out what fell in the river that carried me downstream, and I fell into this pond of sarcoidosis. And in my first example for this guy, it was tattoos. That's not the case for you, but there's going to be something. And you have to figure out, what is it that has pissed off my immune system so much that it looks like it's going haywire right now? What is it? And for those of you that just joined us, that's the monkeys here in Costa Rica that are commenting. But you have to figure out what it is. But in the meantime, you take the life jacket, you do what you have to, but you have to start asking the questions. And unfortunately, your doctors usually are not trained in going upstream. Usually, the specialists for the diagnosis that you've been given are specialists in keeping you afloat. They know how to keep you afloat as best as possible. And thank God for those guys and ladies, thank God that they're available. But that's not the answer, because if you look at the statistics, you guys know the statistics, or you'll find out when you're diagnosed with a severe autoimmune disease, it's not great. And some of the life jackets can postpone or delay or slow down, but it doesn't stop the mechanism usually. There's some exceptions to that, but that's not usually the case. So you get the life jacket, but then you've got to ask the questions. What the heck happened here? Where did this come from? And the experts often don't know. They haven't had the time to get the training to go upstream and to learn this whole world of what's called functional medicine and where did this stuff come from. So you have to get out of the pond with the life jacket and get back upstream and figure out what happened. Now, that's what the book, The Autoimmune Fix, is all about. That's why I wrote that book, is that it's 35 years of pulling all of this together with my mentors so that people read this book and they say, oh, this just makes sense. Okay, so what do I need? Well, I need to find a practitioner. Okay, how do I find a practitioner? Well, you go to the Institute for Functional Medicine's website, which is functionalmedicine.org, and you look for a practitioner that's certified. Those are the ones who have spent an extra 3.5 years after they got their medical degrees or naturopathic degrees or chiropractic degrees, and they've spent 3.5 years and passed the test to say, yes, you're certified in functional medicine. And you find someone who can help you ask these questions and find the right answers. It is not an easy path, but it is the path to figure out, am I able to put this thing to slow it down or to put it into remission? Now, the premise of autoimmune diseases across the board is that it's a trilogy. There's a trilogy in the development of autoimmune diseases. And we find that consistently this is shown to be the case. And there's lots of science, lots of research on this. First, you've got the genes. And you can't do anything about that. That's the deck of cards you were dealt. But that doesn't mean you get the disease or you have to keep the disease. It just means that's the weak link in your chain. Mrs. Patient, if you pull at a chain, it always breaks at the weakest link. It's at one end, the middle, the other end, your heart, your brain, your liver, your kidneys, wherever your genetic weak link is, that's where the chain's going to break if you pull too hard. For some people, it's rheumatoid arthritis. For some people, it's Alzheimer's. For some people, it's sarcoidosis. For some people, it's thyroid. It's the weak link in the chain. It's kind of a cute thing I say, stop pulling on the chain so hard. And learning to live a healthy life is learning how not to pull on the chain so hard, right? It's all these little things that make the difference. So the first thing is genetics. The second thing is an environmental trigger that set it off. And the environmental trigger can be mercury toxicity. It can be ink tattoos. It can be phthalates from plastics. It can be lead toxicity, aluminum. It can be anything, bacteria, Klebsiella, that I showed you the study on, or Pseudomonas is another very common bacteria. There are so many triggers that might be the environmental trigger that took you over the edge. The only one we know for sure, every time, there's only one autoimmune disease, but it's a good example because it sets the stage and it helps scientists to understand this much more, is celiac. In celiac disease, we know unequivocally the environmental trigger is wheat. That's it. Stop wheat and the celiac disease goes into remission. Sometimes partially, sometimes completely, but we know that environmental trigger. And there are hundreds of papers on different environmental triggers for different autoimmune diseases. So we have to figure out with your practitioner, what is the trigger that set off the immune system that eventually produced this condition called sarcoidosis? What's the trigger? Where is it coming from? Now, that's going back upstream. The third component to autoimmune disease development is your gut and the health of the microbiome. And when it's unhealthy, and in all autoimmune diseases, the microbiome is way out of balance, it causes intestinal permeability or the leaky gut, which throws gasoline on the fire throughout your entire body because all this crud of the things we eat, the good foods, but they're not digested properly, or the bacteria or other things can get through the leaky gut into the bloodstream. And here comes the inflammation, pulling on the chain, manifesting wherever the weak link in the chain is. So that's a whole lot of information. I'm going to take a moment here and say, Sherry and Susan, do you have a question on what I've said so far? Let's start with Susan. Okay. Let's start with Susan.
No, so are you saying that what you eat will help control the spread of this, or will it just keep it sort of at bay?
That's a really good question, Susan. It's a really good question. And what you eat either throws gasoline on the fire or it helps to put the fire out. Everything on your fork, everything that goes in your mouth, except healthy water, that's the only exception. Everything else is either inflammatory, gasoline on the fire, or anti-inflammatory. Mm-hmm. There's no exceptions. And the healthiest foods could be not good for you if your metabolism, your digestion, your genetics says that, I'll give you an example. There's a very comprehensive stool test done now that looks at the microbiome. Very, very comprehensive, a wonderful test. We recommend it to all of our patients. It's called Viome, V-I-O-M-E. And they tell us now, because they've done tens of thousands of tests, that about 30% of the population doesn't have very much of a good bacteria that's supposed to be in the gut called Urtibacter. And if you don't have very much Urtibacter, you can't break down uric acid that's in spinach. So spinach is a really healthy food for all of us, but if you don't have enough of the good bacteria in your gut, you can't break down spinach very well, and you're vulnerable to developing kidney stones. But wait, it's spinach. It's good for me. Well, yeah, but the only thing that all of us need every day is water, healthy water. But everything else is going to be inflammatory or anti-inflammatory. And so what you need is to find a practitioner, go upstream together with a doctor, read my book, The Autoimmune Fix, so that you get this big picture. And then you find the doctor that's going to say, let's find out what foods really work for you and which ones don't. And then you learn, but I've always loved spinach. I love spinach. Well, at this point, spinach is not good for you. It may be in 6 months or a year, but your body really can't use it properly right now. And I'm using that as an example. I'm not picking on spinach. It could be broccoli, it could be chicken, it could be blueberries, it could be anything. That our microbiome, the bacteria in our gut, determines what kind of foods are really going to help us right now and what kind of foods are going to cause more inflammation. So to your question, that's a critically important question. Do you mean foods that I eat might make me worse or make me better? And the answer is absolutely yes. No question about it. If there is one thing you're going to start working on, it's going to be finding out which foods are good for me and which ones are not. Because every time, and I'm going to use a silly example, but every time you eat a Twinkie, every time you drink a Coca-Cola, you're throwing gasoline on the fire, causing more inflammation, and you already have this weak link that's showing as an autoimmune disease. It's going to make it worse. And there's a premise that many have heard me say before. Did you guys out there get this? You know, and I know Sherry and Susan are listening closely. Are the rest of you, are you getting this? Give me a thumbs up if you're still out there, or if I've lost you all out there. I don't know. But there's a well, thank you. So that makes my day when I see that kind of response. Thank you so much. There's this premise that is at the foundation of all the work we do with our patients, and that is base hits win the ball game. Base hits. And Sherry, it was your question that you sent to Facebook that my wife saw, and she asked me to answer. That may, and as I said earlier, I spent an hour writing out an answer. This is crazy. Let's bring Sherry on, and so I can talk to everybody about this. You know that. So thank you, Sherry, for reaching out with that one. Base hits win the ball game. Every time you do one of the good things for your health, you get that much better. Every time you do one of those things not good for your health, you get that much worse. And when you're dealing with an autoimmune disease as serious as the one that both of you are dealing with, you don't have a lot of leeway to do worse, right? And the drugs that help to suppress the symptoms for a period of time, the life jacket that you're wearing, which is important, really important, but it's like this life jacket, but the water gets more turbulent and you keep getting splashed with the waves because you had another Twinkie, or you had another Pepsi, or whatever it is that in your lifestyle is not good for you. And it could be spinach. I mean, it could be anything. But you've got to find out, what is it? What works for my body and what does? And it's not an easy task. I'm sorry to say this is not easy. This becomes most important in your life. In my opinion, your kids are first. If they're under 18, you take care of your kids as best you can, but you've got to be around to take care of your kids. So taking care of your health comes first, right? As much as possible. So you've got to allocate the time to learn the questions. It's extremely frustrating for people that have no experience in this world to learn this stuff. That's why I wrote the book that I wrote, The Autoimmune Fix. Because I try my best in everyday language, like you pull at a chain, it breaks at the weakest link, and everything on your fork is either inflammatory or anti-inflammatory. I tried the best as I could to use everyday language and not geek out on you, right? So that you could get these concepts and then just start asking the questions. And what happens, now I'm going to ask people out there to give me a thumbs up if what I say is true. How many of you out there are really pissed off at your doctors because no one ever told you this? And you've been going down this path of doing whatever it was that you've been trying to suppress with the life jackets. Yeah, here come all the hearts, right? And here they come, because unfortunately, this is so common now. Our healthcare system, our doctors are trained in life jacket medicine. I call it life jacket medicine. It's really, really important. And Sherry and Susan, if you can see all the thumbs up and the hearts right now, I don't know if you can, but this is so common to see. Life jacket medicine is critical medicine. You need the drugs, you take them. But you're on a journey now. You're on a journey, and you've got to start learning what the questions are to ask, and then putting the team together that's going to help you find out the answers. Because one more thing I'm going to say, and then I'll stop for a minute. Most everyone are just like Sherry. Sherry wrote to me at Facebook and said, I've been diagnosed with this really serious disease. What supplement do I take to fix it? And that's not the language she used, but that's what she asked. So I want to live my life the way I've lived my life. So what pill can I take to get rid of this problem, but keep living in this pond where the waterfall keeps coming in, because this is how I live my life, and it could be mold in your house. It could be, if Mrs. Patient, if you go on vacation for a week and you come home, do you have to open the windows to air the house out? Anyone that says yes to that has to have their house checked for mold. Because if you've got mold in the house, you're breathing mold every day. And that's the most common trigger. Now, we know that for Alzheimer's, there's 5 different types of Alzheimer's, and the most common type, over 60%, is inhalation Alzheimer's. It's what you're inhaling that's the gasoline on the fire for your brain. So there are just so many questions to ask, and it's completely overwhelming. But you guys, to save your lives, are going to learn how to ask the questions. So the message I wanted to bring to the world today, when you get diagnosed like this, game changer, complete game changer. And what you have to understand is that something happened way back here, and something kept falling in the river, and you kept going farther downstream, farther downstream, farther downstream, and you fell over into the waterfall of sarcoidosis, cardiac sarcoidosis. For somebody else, it's Hashimoto's thyroid disease. For somebody else, it's multiple sclerosis. But this concept is true across the board. Doesn't matter what the diagnosis is. Now, each condition is different. The bacteria or the inks or the molecular mimicry is different for different conditions, but the concept is the same. And you'll never know unless you educate yourself to ask these questions. So usually I tell people 2 things. I tell them: base hits win the ball game. And this is all in my next book that comes out September 18th, guys. I'm doing the plug right now. September 18th. It's called You Can Fix Your Brain, 1 hour a week to the best memory, productivity, and sleep you've ever had. So it comes out September 18th. But it's elaborating the book. Base hits win the ball game, and 1 hour a week. Now, for the 2 of you, you can't do 1 hour a week. You need 1 hour a day, maybe, or 1 hour every 2 days, or whatever you're able to allocate. But 1 hour a week in general, I'm going to allocate 1 hour a week or 1 hour a day. And I'm just going to learn a little more about this concept. It's going to be overwhelming. I'm not going to understand it. I got to tell you, when I read some of these papers, I've got to read them 3 or 4 times because I don't get it. So what the heck what's he trying to say? And I've got to read it again and again because, some of this is not my world, but you just stay focused. You give another 1 hour a week or 1 hour a day, and you just keep going at it a little bit, base it. Okay, I learned a little bit today. Man, this is overwhelming. Wow, this is really overwhelming. And you take your meds for the life jacket in the meantime to keep you focused or to keep you able to keep going, right? But you keep working at this. You keep asking the questions. You keep looking to put the team together. Now, my team can work with both of you if you want. But I always recommend your own doctors for this. But you've got to find a team to help you because this is not your area of expertise. But no one's going to ask the questions unless you ask the questions. And the only way you ask the questions is if you get the big picture. And that's what my book, The Autoimmune Fix, is about, is developing the big picture. Okay, so Susan asked the last question. Sherry, I'll ask you now. Do you have a question?
It was just that original one that I asked you, just about helping to suppress the immunity, because the doctors and talking and the pages that I've joined also mention that they'll put you on the steroids, and people have some negative reaction. So that was just one of them. I've been doing AIP protocol for months. I also have been doing a lot of educating myself, and it's funny you mentioned overwhelming. Oh my gosh, sometimes I say to my daughter, I just can't read anymore, because you just get so overwhelmed. And there's also a lot of contradictory information that I've read. It's like, oh gosh, especially along the lines of supplements, because I've always been a little bit big on supplements just to try and help. So I've learned a lot, overwhelmed, and especially now, but I have Hashimoto's, Sjogren's or Scourge. I never know how to pronounce that. Sjogren syndrome,
Sjogren's.
Sjogren's, yeah. I always forget it, sorry. But I've been on this journey, to my knowledge, since 2011, when I got a very sore stomach, which is now I know is the leaky gut. And wasn't really instructed, didn't really know what to do, but went gluten-free, dairy-free and all those in 2015, when somebody that I seen a naturopath and was informed, oh yes, you've got a raging autoimmune disease, and we were just looking at the thyroid antibodies at that point, didn't know to look any further. So yes, I'm right back up the river. But I have gone over into the waterfall because of this, which was only picked up because I got the edema swelling all in my legs, and they had a D-dimer marker showed, and so they called me back to the hospital. I was like, oh wow, shivers, it's a Saturday, what's wrong? And that's when they were searching for a clot, and they came up with the nodules, or not nodules, sorry, the lymph nodes.
Granulomas.
That's that in my heart, and also some in my lung. And it's like, oh my gosh, okay. So I'm still waiting for my MRI, but I'm hoping that's going to be very soon. So
okay,
yeah.
well, thank you. Thank you for that background. So here we have a person with at least 3 different autoimmune diseases, and the AIP that she's referring to is the Autoimmune Protocol. It's a diet, it's an eating style. In general, it's a smart move. If you're going to shotgun an eating style, meaning just like everybody to do it, the Autoimmune Protocol is a very good one. And Susan, you'll just Google Autoimmune Protocol, or you'll talk to one of your friends, and Mary Agnes or Sherry now, and you'll learn about that. It's a good general approach to take. It reduces the inflammation on the fire dramatically. And to Sherry's comment, yes, in traditional specialists for these types of autoimmune conditions, their training has been to suppress the immune system and to slow down the progress of this thing, destroying your tissue. And there's great value in that concept. While you're going upstream to figure out where's the inflammation coming from, so that as you reduce the inflammation, the autoimmune mechanism many times starts to calm down. And then you don't need these immune suppressing drugs with all the side effects any longer. So once again, if you need the meds, you take them. You're in the turbulent pond of sarcoidosis, you take the meds. And you ask the question. So we have Sherry, who is about 6 years ahead of Susan. Susan's just been diagnosed with this, and Sherry's been at this now for 6 years, and 3 or 4 autoimmune diseases were identified. But I'm impressed, Sherry, with your energy, your clarity, your outlook. Clearly you are a pro at being a health consumer, trying to figure out what's going on in your body, and that's out of necessity, which
Yes.
is
Absolutely, absolutely. And so I'm grateful that you mentioned to take those drugs if I'm prescribed. But so once it looks like the inflammation has decreased and it's not growing, could I then take the herbal supplement, to suppress immunity? And do you know which one?
You should not have to see if your immune system's activated. There's a reason why it's activated. When you reduce the reason, you reduce the activation. Your immune system always wants to calm down. Your immune system is the armed forces in your body. It's the Army, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, Navy. It's there to protect you. It doesn't get activated just out of the blue. There has to be a reason why. Now it can get caught in an on position, locked in an on position, but we haven't seen the need to suppress immune function when we eliminate the gasoline on the fire and stimulate some healing to occur. We just haven't seen the need yet. There may be those cases. I just don't have that experience where I've seen that to be a necessity. We have a really good question here from Donna. She said, how do you ask your doctor to run the appropriate lab tests for your conditions without insulting them? I have Sjogren syndrome and will not take pharmaceuticals, just supplements. Donna, the first thing, if your Sjogren's is getting worse, you're causing a lot of tissue damage. And it may be that it's appropriate for you to take the meds for a short period of time. It may be, but how do you ask your doctor to run the test without insulting them? That's a really good question. My usual response is you bring new doctors onto your team. You don't fire your Sjogren's specialist, but he's a specialist in Sjogren's. And he's not a specialist in functional medicine. So you bring other people on the team with you and you develop a healthcare team. You are in charge of your health, not your doctor. And if your doctor will not do the tests that you want to do, I would get the information. You can download information from our site or wherever you're going to get your information. And you can say, doctor, this test sounds pretty interesting, that it might be of value to help me figure out where my inflammation's coming from. Could you order this test? And if your doctor says, well, I don't know anything about the test, I can't order tests that I don't know anything about, okay, will you read about this test and let me know if you think it's of value? And if they do that, great, you're at least getting a participant, and he may disagree with you, but you're getting a participant. If he won't do that, say, okay, thanks so much. And then you bring another person on the team. You don't necessarily fire them, but you bring somebody else on the team. So, Donna, I hope that answers your question on that one. Susan, you're on mute. Do you have a question?
Why am I on mute?
Okay, you're okay now.
Okay. No, I'm good. I'm just listening and taking it all in.
Okay. How's it going for you here?
It's good. It's good. Learning a lot.
Okay. Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you so much. Sherry, do you have a question?
Yes, since I've been doing the AIP, it's like been over 3 months and I've, done the elimination. I haven't really tried to introduce anything because I still feel like I might still have a little bit of a gut issue. So I'm sort of thinking I didn't have as many symptoms at the beginning of the AIP as I do now, like a lot of fluttering, heart racing, the edema swelling, the shortness of breath, generally feeling quite unwell in the last week. So I'm obviously still missing something. And I was listening to a gentleman on the weekend about the microbiome. And I'm also looking into the Eat Right for Your blood type, but I still feel like my symptoms are increasing. So I'm obviously not doing everything right.
Okay, good. That's a very good observation on your part, not just being in the pond of your symptoms, but you're observing what's happening in that pond and saying, there's something, I'm missing something. I don't know what I'm missing, but I'm missing something. And my answer is, yes, you are. And I don't know what it is, but you need to do some testing to find out. You're in Australia, so I don't know what tests you have available there, but I would want to see tests, and I'll tell you the names of the tests that I would use here to see. There's a test by the laboratory Genova called the One. I would do that test. I'd consider SpectraCell's analysis also to see about your nutrient levels and your metabolic rate and your body's ability to use nutrients and what's missing right now, because there are some deficiencies that are likely developing from your eating style right now. And I don't know what they are, but good observation on your part, and to get some testing done for that. Kat says, exactly. My lupus. Kat says, this is a comment here. Exactly. My lupus is all in control on no meds, thanks to you, Doc. Thank you, Kat. Glad to hear that. As long as you're monitoring and making sure that your antibodies are not going back up. And if that's the case, the antibodies are down, your lupus is in remission right now. Way to go, girl. High five to you and to everyone else out there that's getting those kinds of benefits. Way to go. And just keep checking every 6 months or so for the rest of your life, because that's the weak link in your chain. And your diet may not change, but your environment may change. They may spray mosquito spray outside your house next week, and you breathe that, and that takes you over the edge, right? So you just check every 6 months or so. Once you've been diagnosed with an autoimmune condition, you check every 6 months or so and make sure that all of those antibodies are still in remission. And Kelly Kohlmeyer says, this works for Hashimoto's also. Thank you, Kelly. Yes, it does. And Marianne says, I understand it. Food does make a difference. Yes, it does. And Jorge says, mother's milk could also be bad for the baby. Well, that may be true, Jorge, but that's because mom has food allergies or mom's got toxicity that's just coming through the mother's milk. In general, mother's milk is the best thing for a baby. But if mom's eating Twinkies and drinking Coca-Cola or has an autoimmune condition going on, then there may be some problems with the breast milk. That's very true. Nita says, my daughter's keratosis pilaris and constant chronic cough recovered when she stopped gluten. Exactly. There are so many skin conditions and autoimmune conditions that go into remission on a gluten-free diet. For those of you in India, I'm going to make the announcement today. I've been asked to chair the Celiac Society of India's international conference, and we are hosting an international conference on wheat-related disorders in New Delhi on January 12th and 13th of next year. And I'm bringing the dream team from all over the world, and they've already agreed to come to New Delhi. So we'll be talking a lot more about that in Facebooks to come. Misty's watching. Hello, Misty. Glad to see you're out there. Dana says, yes, regular doctors no help until I found my functional medicine trained doc. Okay, Dana, that's true. But regular docs have their place. They really have their place. The problem is when we expect them to be functional medicine docs and they just haven't had the training, and they just don't know what it is. And so they can't even say, you should go to a functional medicine doc. They can't say that, they just don't know, right? So Wanda says, is bottled water considered healthy water? In general, Wanda, yes, but the problem with bottled water is plastic. And the plasticizers in the plastic leach into the water very easily. If the water gets warm, if the water is left in your car. Do you guys know if you leave the bottle in your car for a day or two and it tastes like the bottle? Yeah, it does. That's plastic. Don't drink it. Don't drink it because that's phthalates. Those are toxic chemicals. Donna says, just got on. What issues does Sherry have? Sherry and Susan both have sarcoidosis, cardiac sarcoidosis. It's a nasty disease, and Sherry's had it for a number of years. She's about 6 years into the protocol that she's been putting together, and Susan was just diagnosed. And I'm thankful for both of them to be willing to come on to motivate me to talk about this topic, and for the rest of the world to see you guys and to really relate to you, as so many people are here and saying, Veronica says, I feel this too, and it's so overwhelming and frustrating. Yeah, it is. That you've got to learn this for yourself, for you and your family. You have to take care of yourselves. Nobody else is going to do it for you. You really need to do it yourself. And, you know, it's the fallacy of this healthcare system in the United States. Guys, I'll just say a couple of things. The World Health Organization rates the United States #1 in the world every single year, #1 or #2 in healthcare technology. We have the very best healthcare technology in the world, and we're constantly ranked in the bottom 5 of 53 industrialized countries in healthcare effects, quality of healthcare. We're constantly at the bottom. We have the best technology, we spend the most per person, and we have the worst results. Do you think the system doesn't work? Of course it does not work, but we're always encouraged to stay in the system. And when we get scared, like Susan is scared right now because she's gotten a diagnosis, she goes to the system and she does what they say. And that's smart to do what they say because you're in the pond and you need to stay afloat in the pond, but get out of the pond. You know, you've got to learn how to get out of the pond. The monkeys agree. I don't know if you can hear them, but those are the monkeys out there. They agree. They agree. Okay, guys, it's been over an hour, and I'm so sorry that we've been on so long. But this has been, I think, a really important conversation. And I think for all of you out there, please pay this forward. Please tell your friends about this, like this, share the video, share the link. If you share the link, Facebook announces this event I do to more people in the world. That's how this works, right? And so if you share the link with your friends, please share it with 5 people, everybody that's here. If you share it with 5 people, then it'll help a lot so that we can carry this message out in the future. And Susan and Sherry, thank you both so much for coming on. You now have contact information for us, and you're more than welcome to reach out to us. And
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes,
we definitely will. Yes.
Very much our pleasure. There are
Hi,
thousands.
Sherry, nice to meet you.
You too.
There are thousands of people out here tonight who have met you and who are sympathetic to what you both are going through and know that, you know, there, but for the grace of God, go them. You know, the same thing. So thank you all so very much.
Thank you.
I'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.